Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.
I like the new intro, lads. Do you?
It's very good.
Good, isn't it?
Mark looks like our enforcer. I'm so glad to have him on the team. If you don't share and it's like, this man will come and knock on your door.
It's like when we went to the CIC and they thought he was your butler.
They didn't. You just made a joke of.
Okay.
Mike, you could say I'm his gardener. It plays both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's loads of gardeners who talk like you, Gav. I see the hydrangeas need
the begonias are slightly sub-fussed to this autumn.
That reminds me of my dad. My dad helped out this woman who was about 95 when she was living on her own, and after my mum died, my dad decided to do a bit of gardening because he'd retired. So he was a sprightly 67-year-old or something, and he was helping her. And then when she got taken to hospital for what would be her end, he decided to visit her because he's a kindly old soul. And when he arrived, she called him boy. He was 67, but because she was in her night, she said, "Boy, bring me this. Boy, do that." And then she said, "Boy, rub my ankles." So he was in the room rubbing her ankles, and the nurse came in and said, "Is this your son?" And she said, "No, it's my gardener." Let's crack on. Okay. I'm
not rubbing anyone's ankles. Let that be clear now.
You're rubbing Mark's ankles.
I'll put a chauffeur's hat on. I'll drive Mark round, but I won't be his boy gardener and rub his ankles. That sounds terrifying.
Well, it's so nice to be with you both. We're back together for the first time as a trio since last Friday, this very day last week, when I jumped on the Eurostar to join my fellow pilgrims as we began to make our way from Paris to Chartres. Many of you, I think, will have seen the live feeds that I delivered during that time when I was able to. So here we are, a week since we've been together.
Well, we've got questions to ask you.
You've got questions? Okay.
And see, the problem with asking someone questions is it exposes you, the questioner, quite as much as the answer. So you're going to see I don't know a great deal about pilgrimages, but there's nothing that ChatGPT, whatever it is, can't help me with. But I thought I'd ask you first of all what the greatest change was, because pilgrimages are supposed to change you. We'll talk about that later on, perhaps. There are kind of signs of things that people expect pilgrimages to do, but was a shift, a change, what is Catherine any different at all this Friday than she was last Friday as a pilgrim, as a Catholic, as a woman, as a person?
Well, she's not wearing any makeup, so there you go. The pilgrimage has stripped me of my makeup. So
well, I was going to I was going to ask you a question.
You barefaced and burnt.
I wasn't sure if that was too personal, and maybe you can. But I did wonder if it's different for you as a woman on a pilgrimage, not putting a face on, not making up. Because I mean, I don't understand makeup. I'm too heterosexual at the wrong end of the scale. But I understand people like to look a certain way in public. I keep on thinking about hair transplants, for example, which I think is probably my equivalent. But so did it matter that you weren't wearing makeup on a pilgrimage? Does it, being stripped of makeup? Okay, you're a woman. That Mark and I can't identify with this, but other people might. What was that like?
No, in all seriousness, it doesn't matter a bit. But you're really struck by the contrast between the increasing layers of artificiality that we put on in the world. It's very hard to.
God, you're going to go deep. You're going to go much deeper than I thought. Okay, take us away.
No. It's just that might be one example of it. But what struck me is that there's almost like this. We speak of being in the world, but not of the world. And sometimes we say it, but we kind of are of the world. And to go on that pilgrimage with 20,000 other people, many of them really young, and to see that it's like there's this other world that exists completely in the world, but their glowing faces and joy and youth and vibrancy and hungry for Jesus and with a spring in their step. And okay, we talked about makeup, but yes, suddenly we don't need all these things. We don't need the artificiality. We don't need the constant communication. We don't need phones. I mean, I did have my phone because I was broadcasting, and even then I felt out of place. And I thought, I want to do it because I want to share the experience, but it didn't feel like the most natural thing to be doing, to pulling out your battery pack and your phone and recording. And so, yes, I think there's that sense of being stripped bare of those things that we've come to believe we need and rely on. And because they make our lives so comfortable, we won't give them up. We won't do it. We almost have to be forced to do it. And when you do it, you feel a weight taken off. You feel a sense of freedom. So it was wonderful to be with people sort of stripped of the everyday the little things that we're dependent on every day. But did that bring with it a kind of suffering? Yes, it did, because as I said, a lot of the things that we depend on in life bring us comfort. And here we have this really strange thing going on in a culture that is keen on comfort and not keen on suffering, and looking for every opportunity to evade, avoid, get rid of suffering. This is going on at exactly the time where we're bringing in an assisted suicide bill, perhaps it looks like, and has already been brought in across many Western countries, a time when we're saying abortion up to 24 weeks isn't enough, it has to be up to birth. We'll give it time and it will be post-birth. I mean, it really will. That's it will be, well, we've got this bunch of cells now ex utero, and there's problems with them that we didn't identify in the womb. So I think it's acceptable to now end the life of those bunch of cells. Now, you think this might be utter madness, but I'm sure if you wound back a few hundred years, people would consider it utter madness that physicians who are meant to heal and care for you are killing you, and that mothers who are created to give birth, to give life, are killing that very life in their womb. So to have young people, especially, it is significant to see that it was young people, because in a sense, when you get old, you're sort of, you've got your aches and pains. But to see young people who don't have to do this, who have the phones, who have the comfort, who have instant access to whatever they want delivered from Amazon, who can binge watch whatever television program they want, to see them voluntarily give up that comfort and suffer with joy was otherworldly. It was such a contrast, such a stark contrast, and so powerful that you can't come back from something like that unchanged.
I think it's a massive thing, Chartres, isn't it? If people aren't aware, like, it's a huge undertaking. It's not just like a day's wander along, to the local church. It's 100 kilometers. So you're kind of, there's a penitential dimension to it, I think. Did you experience that? Obviously you did. Talk to us about your pain, Katherine.
Speechless, yeah, that's right.
Talk to us about your suffering. Yeah, I did. I'd gone into it almost frightened to say I was doing it, because I was unsure of my own ability. And I think this is something also really important. Is I was speaking with another woman roughly my age, a little older than me, and we were saying one of the things that is quite hard for maybe all people, but I know as a mother, as a woman, is to relinquish control, is to say it's not in my hands. And I think sometimes we can fall into that trap of thinking that somehow if we make enough effort, we can achieve things. outside of God's grace. We just, we can't pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And I went into it thinking that I can't know the answers. I remember speaking with somebody just recently who'd been offered a job and they didn't know whether to take it or not. And they were saying, but what if this? And what if that? And what if down the line this problem happens? And I said, there comes a point where you just have to leap. You just have to say, Lord, I think you've brought me to this point. I'm going to leap, and I'm going to trust that down the line you will help me to get through whatever I need to get through, because you don't know. And every day of the pilgrimage felt like that. Embarking on it, there were a couple of health things before I went, and I thought, I don't think I can go. Lord, if you want me to go, just help me take that step. And then I arrived. Then I did day one, and day one was ridiculously painful at the end. It was okay until about the last, well, the sort of the death hill, as my chapter leader James kept teasing me about, saying, oh, look, you'll get to see all the statues of the people who died along the way.
How far is it? How far did you do on the first day?
The first day was 47 kilometres. So the first day was the longest. We're going to check out the mileage on that, aren't we? What that means to miles people. Yeah, so the first day was 42 kilometres. The second was 35, and the last was 23.
So that's 47 kilometres, about 30 miles, basically.
Yeah, so
right?
Probably a little under 30 miles.
Like, I walk every day. I walk 5K every day, and over weekend, if we go for our long walk, that's about 14K. So what's that? About 7 miles, 8 miles, something like that. And that is, by the end of that, I know I've had, you've had it. All right, perhaps we'll stop for a couple of pints after through, but you've had a good walk. And that, so 30 miles would really be pushing it in a day. I think, like, it's a long old way, isn't it? For anyone, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and not just that. You're not just walking like you walk the dog. You and I both got dogs. We all have, actually. We're dog people, all three of us. And we walk our dogs, and you might stop at the pub. You might stroll. It's not strolling. You're walking, and you're walking with purpose. There's no strolling around, taking a break, sitting down for a bit, having a rest. You are walking 30 miles, or just under 30 miles. And you don't get to the end of the day and say, oh, now I get to go to bed. You get to the end of the day and you feel like you're in Songat refugee camp. You're literally in a tent, blowing in a gale, zips not working, no ground sheet, bowls of soup being handed out as if it's Médecins Sans Frontières, and crippled people hobbling around with their hands like this. And who cares what flavour it is? Who cares whether you like it? You just shove it in to stay alive. It is like that. You do, and you think, and then I've got to get up at 5 a.m. and do it all over again.
I'd like to ask a question. So my question is an extension of Mark's, and it's my preoccupation, and it may not affect you quite so much. But I was aware, looking at those things. I mean, basically, you were doing forced marches, and there were people saying, "Hurry up, quicker!" And then, then there was the traffic jam. You having tried so fast, you then got slowed down and stopped because other people, the thing snaked. But my question was about control. So you're a mother, you run your household, you kind of control your household. You're doing it all day long in small things and big things. What was it like being controlled for 3 days by everybody else? I mean, I'd find that lack of autonomy, I think I'd find it really frightening and rather difficult. They would be one of the hardest things to consent to. I wouldn't mind if my legs were a bit better, consenting to the forced march if I'd done the work. But being told when and how fast to walk, and when to stop, and when to start, and when to sleep, and when to get up, I find that quite difficult.
Yeah, that was difficult. But again, that's part of the sacrifice. That's part of what you're relinquishing, that control, and you're saying, this has to be done, and it won't be done unless it's done in this way. So you have to just get up at that time and get going with your chapter at that time. And that's where I said, you just have to trust in God. I remember on the end of the first night, in fact, I ended up in the medical tent, embarrassingly, because I'd arrived at the first camp and it was uphill, and I'd had a very heavy rucksack digging on my hips pretty much all day, and it got heavier and heavier with each mile. And my kids had gone ahead of me. My youngest daughter was a bit upset because she didn't know where I was, so I'd lagged a long way behind, and I thought, I'm going to get there. All I need to do is get there. And I got there, and to where the cases were for the bedding for the night, and I just fell to the floor. And I thought, I'm okay. I'm not dying or anything. I just can't stand up. I can't do it. And some people gathered the way they do when they see someone kind of collapsed on the floor, and said, are you all right? Are you all right? I said, yeah, I just need to lie down. Just let me lie down. You can't lie down. You can't. I have to just lie down. And then these French came along and were fussing over me and said, you have to go to the medical tent. And I said, no, I don't need to go to the medical tent. They said, you have to go to the medical tent. So I went to the medical tent, and there were these poor people being wheeled in. Their feet were like, there was people shivering with with aluminium foil wrapped around them. People's feet were blistered and bleeding. Some people had collapsed, and some people were taken off to hospital. And they took my blood pressure, and I was fine. I knew I was fine. And I said, look, I just need to go and lie down. And I lay down in bed, and I said, Lord, I don't think I can do the next day because I can't walk a step. I'm in too much pain. And I said, but Lord, if you want me to, you've brought me this far. I'm in your hands. I'm going to get up, and I'm just going to just get up and put a foot forward and see how many more steps I can take. And I got up and I did that, and the pain actually started to ease. And I thought, I'll do another mile. And I just kept going. And so thanks be to God, I was able to carry on and do the whole journey. But at the end of day one, I was completely, but again, that's relinquishing that and saying, Lord, I'm in your hands. And you really feel that, you really feel you are completely dependent on God. And we do anyway in our everyday lives, but I think we don't always realize the extent to which we are managing everything. We are managing every convenience and all the timings in our lives. And we say, I'll relinquish this, but I don't know if we really do, because unless you are in that situation, it's incredibly hard to.
Well, you've answered my second question, which was going to be, how does this translate spiritually in terms of discipleship? And so you've done it automatically. Do you think there's I know this is a silly question, you can't possibly know, but do you think you'll find it, because I find this so difficult, easier to trust in the next crisis? Because there was a crisis, you prayed, God came to your help, he used supernatural means, natural means, people. Does it add to your store of confidence in some kind of way?
Yeah, completely. I think if we're being honest, that's an ebb and flow throughout the Christian life, throughout our journey on earth, is moments where you're prone to despair, and then you just cling to Christ. I know Mark will speak to this and has spoken about this, is just having sometimes being in situations where you're forced to trust, because that's all you've got. You're forced to trust in him. And
Mark, do you want to add? I mean, Catherine brought you in there. Do you want to add anything at that point? Because that's been such a part of your journey.
I don't know, not really.
You don't have to.
I totally get what you're saying. Just hanging on, yeah.
Yeah, it's incomparable. I'm talking about a pilgrimage, but just the general principle of saying, yes, I need to hang on. So I do think it's helped perhaps a weakness in me which is to trust and not and recognize that it's like, look at the lilies in the field, look at the
I want to have a conversation with you. I'm going to abuse our relationship. No,
okay.
Not about Lily. Well, ever since you and I have known each other, we've had a kind of theological ping pong. I think you're too much of an activist, and you think I'm too much of a quietist. And I keep on saying, it's okay, Catherine, God will sort it. And you keep on saying, God sorts those who sorts themselves. Why do you think he's given us free will and determination? Use it or lose it. And I'm parodying us both. But it's interesting to hear you. I'm not trying to win an argument. It's interesting to hear you talk about
everyone.
The quietist bit, because I haven't heard you represent it quite in that way before, and I wonder if
it's I do believe that we don't just stand there. Mark quite often shares an image. What is that, Mark, of someone with a shovel saying, "Come on, Lord, dig a hole." I do, and there's the old. You do,
you mean the cross, the guy. So is that the image you mean of the guy?
Well, no. You shared an image a couple of times of someone with like a spade and the ground, and they're about to dig a hole, and then it says something like they're praying for a hole to be dug, and you have the tagline, you've got to
the spade.
That sense of pray as if everything depends on God, and act as if everything depends on you. So I do think we are called to act. I do think I had to get myself to the pilgrimage. I had to get up every day and make that choice, and that's the will. So what I was saying more was aligning my will to God's and saying, I'm here, like I trust in you, Lord. I'm prepared to do the work, but I need your grace to get me through.
That's very good. Yeah, I see that. Very good.
So I don't think it's ever a case of one or the other. It's not sit inner and wait for things to happen. But neither is it saying I can do everything without God's help, because we can't do that. So it's the both and again of that, and really this idea, there's nothing, you cannot corrupt the goodwill. All we have to do is choose Jesus. We just have to make that choice to choose Christ and say, your will be done, Lord, and then step out in trust. But you still got to do the stepping. We are pilgrims, aren't we? We're exiles in this world, journeying home to God. And that was beautiful as well, this idea that we're just stepping, we're just pilgrims, and we're not made for this world. This is like our whole journey, the whole journey of our life. It's difficult, it's challenging, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's both terrible and wonderful, frightening and hopeful, and we're in it together, and we're helping each other, and we're praising together. We are praising as one people with our eyes fixed on the same destination.
I've got so many questions, but I'll dominate it. Mark, do you want to go next?
No, go on.
It's weird being interviewed.
All right, okay. Well, so when I think
we've talked a bit off the camera, haven't we? And it's difficult then to think what would people be interested in, and because when you first got back, I was like, oh, what was this and what was that? But mostly practical things about the toilets and the sleeping arrangements and how often you got a break and stuff like that. That was really what interested me, because I've got a really good friend who does all the translations. So he's he's been involved in it for years, and he's been trying to drag me along for years and years and years. But he's never sold it to me, and Catherine is not selling it to me.
I've almost had panic attacks.
That doesn't mean I don't. I've got a great deal of admiration for anyone who goes on it, sort of thing.
Well, when I was listening to you, the two of you talk to James, and Catherine was explaining her toilet angst with what it is to be a woman, to be in a woman's queue, to be a woman's queue for a portaloo, to be a woman's queue for a portaloo where everyone's got to do it in 20 seconds, and you've only got a minute and a half for the. I'm having panic attacks at night thinking of that. So leaving aside the toilet story,
there was this lovely nun in front of me.
Tell me about lovely nuns.
I knew you'd love to hear about the nuns, Gavin. She was so lovely. I've forgotten her name. There's no time to ask names. Sister Lovely, and she was there, rushing and singing, and she was saying, "It is difficult, isn't it? It's quite difficult for women." I said, "It's a little bit, sister." And then at the end, as we approached Chartres, she was singing and accompanying me and saying, it's just around this corner, because she's been doing it for years. So when it's your first time, you don't know where you think, is it around this corner or the next corner, or how long have we got? And she said, we've just got one more corner to turn and then we've done it. She was lovely. So there's a lot of wonderful nuns. Sorry, you were taking a different direction there.
No, go with the wonderful. No. Let's go with the wonderful nuns. I'm going to ask you what the church looks like in a minute, but don't stop the wonderful nun stories, because I could listen to those all day.
Well, that's it. That's it, really. They're just. I think what struck me as well is there were so many. How can I say this? So you live in the world, and I got back from Chartres and I got on the train with my luggage. Here's an example. And my luggage was in the way of the aisle, and I was trying my best. I had a massive rucksack. I had the kids. I had a massive case. I was trying. It was busy. And when I saw that it was in the way of someone, I'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And this kid got on headphones, pumping music, trousers down his legs, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he just goes, no, doesn't make eye contact with me, doesn't stop his headphones, doesn't interact at all, doesn't even acknowledge my existence. He was about 23, right? And I'd just come from 3 days with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of 19, 20, 18, 23, 24, 25-year-olds, all different. And here's what they were like. Here's what those young people were like. Young boys helping young girls. Can I help you? Can I take your rucksack for a bit? Speaking with respect to their elders. And one of the young men said, "Mrs. Bennett, would you like to sit here during a break?" Looking me in the eye. Like, it is like there is a different world of people that are unsoiled by the culture. And that boy on the train is not, in some ways, he's just a product of the world we live in. You got your headphones on, you listen to your music, people are in the way, everyone's busy, everyone's rushing, get out my way, tut, tut, moan, grumble, don't make eye contact. So what? He's one of millions. That's just the world. But then you do this and you think, well, this is not lost. This is not impossible. The young men were also, there were quite a few young men there who were discerning the priesthood. There was a lot of young seminarians, young priests. I'll pull up a couple of pictures now. It's this lovely young priest who we met from America. He's visiting France and some of Europe. We were chatting to him for a good long while. Look at all these young priests here.
That's the mass there, isn't it, on Pentecost Sunday?
This was actually adoration, on the evening of the second night, I think, from 10 o'clock through the night. People kneeling up in the dirt, silent, thousands, tens of thousands of people kneeling in the dirt, kneeling to receive communion, fresh-faced, beautiful, worshipping our Lord. These young, many seminarians, priests. He's not so young, but
I think it's really cogent that you mentioned the letter to Diognetes, didn't you? Like, Christians are those who are in the world but not of the world. And it reminded me, what you were just saying about when I was at school. I think I've told this story before, and just thinking, taking our faith really, really seriously as a young lad of 8, 9 and 10, and just shocked that no one else did. Like, it was that feeling that no one else did. And then, I went to a grammar school that was, had this great reputation for being a great Catholic school. And when I went there, none of the people were the people that you're talking about. And one of the best things about growing up as a Catholic and going on pilgrimages is that you get to choose to be with those people. And as you say, they are out there. That is the Catholic culture. That is Catholic society. That is what we are trying to build. That is the kingdom. And the contrast is so radical. It's a fantastic thing. And that's what we're selling here. That's what we're trying to convince people that is worth engaging with, is the culture that creates those sort of people, that makes your children like that, rather than the guy on the bus with his headphones on who would as soon as walk over you as walk past you, you know.
I'd like to ask you what sounds like, sorry, I think you answered, beg pardon.
No, just that there's a tendency to think, or some people think, and when I would have been at school, it would have been, oh yeah, but that's all the geeks and the losers who do things like that. Nothing wrong with geeks and losers. I've been one most of my life, but the thing is, these are just, in many, that's why I say they're in the world but not of it. They're not some freaks who are not worldly in one sense. They're just completely ordinary young people who are working on a building site, wearing Nike trainers, just ordinary, chatting about ordinary, just chit-chatting about things. But then to see them praying, unashamedly, and absent-mindedly. So you'd hear the Regina Caeli, or you'd hear the Ave Maria, you'd hear prayers being sung, and they're walking around and they're friendly and they're chatting, and then they'd hear, and then they just lock in. They just lock into it, and you can see not thinking, is anyone looking at me? I hope I don't look stupid, because it's just, we do this all the time. We're always doing this. We're praying, we pray the rosary, we pray at home with our families, we say grace before meals, we kneel when we meant to, we show reverence in the right way, and it's just so embedded in who they are that they can't not be that way. It's not a conscious thing, is what I'm saying. And that's a really beautiful thing to see. And I did want to talk about young men in particular, because I think we know that young men have a terrible press, and pornography, Mark, I know, has talked about this, and just talked with Joe McLean recently. Pornography has devastated men and women, absolutely devastated, and destroyed young men such that we hear they can't even perform sexually by something like 25. They're just done in by it. They're that it so knocks down barriers that you knock a barrier down, you move on, you knock a barrier, and suddenly you don't even see your fellow human being with the beautiful dignity with which they were created. It's absolutely destructive and disgusting and vile. And we live in a world that doesn't seem to tell us this. It celebrates perversion. It celebrates pride. It celebrates how many partners you can sleep with. It celebrates sterilizing a woman so that she can enjoy sex for pleasure and nothing else. It celebrates breaking up families to you go and find your happiness, Philip Schofield and the like. It's all about celebrating. So the internal shame that you might have, that instinct that something's wrong, is gone, is broken. And then you layer on the societal shame that might come, and that's gone as well. So now we have a culture where people just they've sort of lost the sense of what's even acceptable. How do I even interact with another human being? And so then you step into this world, and you have young men who recognize that they're different from young women, who recognize that they have a calling to protect a young woman. And that's not just by holding her handbag or opening a door. They protect her by the choices they make about how they allow themselves to be formed. They protect their future wives and daughters by refusing to engage with those things, those images that are being thrust at them, by saying, I'm going to practice self-discipline, I'm going to practice self-control. And it's appealing. It's that there are priests there bombarded by young men asking them about vocations, asking them to pray for them while they're discerning a vocation. And I said to one young man, I said, oh, do you want a family? Do you want children? It must be very difficult when you're discerning the priesthood. And he said, yeah, I really want kids. I'm from a big family and I'd love to have kids. But it's not a sacrifice if you don't sacrifice, if you don't give up something that you want for something, a greater calling, a higher calling. So if he's just a nerd who can't attract a girl and maybe is gay anyway and doesn't really want a girlfriend and wouldn't mind spending 7 years in seminary with a load of other young men, what kind of sacrifice is that? So the very fact that they're ordinary young men who have ordinary instincts, natural instincts and desires to form families, and then say, for God, to serve our Lord, to become a priest, I will sacrifice that, and I will discipline myself and form myself so that I am able to do that, because you can't just do that. Then that is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal witness. And you think, where are the men? Well, they're on the Chartres pilgrimage, because you're not finding them masturbating in bedrooms and watching pornography and dumping their wives. They're not men. They're wimps. So where are the men? And you don't need to become a Muslim to be a man, which is what a lot of our young men seem to think.
Well, I'm going to change tone a little bit. I was going to say, speaking as the nerd who couldn't attract women, but we'll pass on that one. I want to ask you, it sounds like a pretentious question, so let me ask it in the kind of popular form. I want to talk about the monkeys chattering inside the head that wreck our prayer. And so I'm going to ask you about hesychastic prayer in the body, and what it was like, what happened to your mind and your praying and your body as you walked, because you've mentioned a bit to me. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. I know what she's talking about. So when I was younger, I spent some time in a Greek Orthodox monastery and encountered the Jesus prayer and began to practice it, and was astonished at the way in which the Jesus prayer did what it should do, which is to begin to quieten down the roving thoughts, the stuff that leaps up and goes places. And I learned a little bit about the way in which the mind has to become captured by the heart. And this is quite difficult because amongst evangelical Protestants, prayer is all about talking to Jesus. So actually, to move to the point where you're quiet in front of Jesus is really very difficult. And hesychastic prayer, the dull, boring repetition of holy words, so the whole thing sinks out of the mind into the heart, is a very important part of learning to pray. And wonderfully, both the Jesus prayer and the rosary do that. And when you were talking about the singing on the road, it seemed to me that you were talking to me about another deep part of this, and that was your body had begun to conform itself to what your heart was doing. So your body was walking for Jesus whilst you prayed for Jesus, while you thought for Jesus, and your thoughts were, in the end, I've got to put one foot in front of the other. If I put one foot in front of the other, and while you were doing that, the rest was happening. You were praising, people were singing, you were moved. In other words, there was a kind of composite. It sounded like you were talking about the way you walked became in itself a prayer, because prayer was happening, and your mind was reduced to, oh, I've just got to keep walking, and therefore your mind was doing something sort of restrictive, downplayed a bit, but perfectly okay. That's the mind needs to do that if you've got to walk, but the rest of you had somehow got integrated into loving, praising, being carried. So I'm doing a bad job of describing what you described beautifully. Can you describe it better?
I don't remember. As for the singing and walking and praying, it's true that one of the issues in life is distraction. We're always we want to be distracted, in a sense, from ourselves, from our thoughts, from our fears, from our pain, and we turn to alcohol, drugs, entertainment, addictions like that, and they're temporary, but they're never fulfilling. They never satisfy.
Distractions as much as
distractions.
Addictions.
They're yeah, but the addictions, I think, distract us.
Both.
So,
both, yeah.
So both, yeah. And we all have the thoughts that run around, and praying. Actually, what's funny is we've been back a week now, and both my daughter and myself are going around the house driving the men mad, just singing Ave Maria and singing in Latin, and it gets into you. It sort of gets into your bones. It's like it forms you.
That's
As
what I've
Catholics,
heard
I
you
think
talk
we do
about.
that. We do that anyway. You know, I know you guys, and I will have found times I used to invigilate exams, and I'd be walking around really boring hour invigilating exams, praying the rosary over and over and over in my head. And so when you're doing that, you the fact that you're doing it together, you're uniting with others, but you don't need those other distractions, because your focus is just I can't really explain it. It's just walking and walking and walking without messages and emails and podcasts and programs and just even conversation, and just walking. And you think, well, why would you want to do that, and how do you do that?
It's because I was so surprised when
time
I
passes
asked
and
you.
you just
I asked you, I thought that you must have had lots of interesting conversations. You said, no, there were no conversations. I was just putting one foot in front of the other and keeping up. You know,
there were
I'm not
some
saying there were any.
conversations.
No, I know.
Yeah, but there were
amplifying what
long
you're saying.
periods of time, and this is really good for me, and I think probably a lot of you will this will resonate with. You know, life is busy and there's always things to do, and we want to create more stillness and more contemplative time in our lives, and it's not always easy. And there is something about it being like a weight off. I think the thing is, we're so enslaved. We are so enslaved in our lives to so many things. And I keep having this instinct of returning to nature, that we have to try and shed the artificiality in our lives. And I think this is a perfect example of you're walking on your two legs that God's given you. You're just walking on them, and you're praising with your mouth that God's given you. You're listening with the ears he's given you, the heart he's given you. And there's nowhere else to be today but there. And then tomorrow can wait for tomorrow, just today. And then where normally I'm thinking, right, I've got to do this, and I've got to meet Gavin at Mark at 4:00, get the dinner ready. Next week I've got an appointment with, Father Anthony or something. And in those few days, it's just, that's it. Just there's nothing to plan. There's nothing to do. You've just got to go. So, but the praying is and the singing is wonderful, and it just helps you, as James said. It also just helps you to continue. Although I did have an autistic friend say that they struggled a lot with that and would like a silent chapter, because they find any noise very difficult. But for me, it was helpful.
I used to take chaplaincies to Teze, and I know Teze is a different culture, and there's strong things to be said for and against it. But one of the beautiful things is, again, they've taken the notion of repetition, and with some very beautiful and simple tunes, taken very beautiful and simple words, and you simply sing them. And one of the beautiful things about Teze was that late at night, they don't have the same tradition, tragically, of adoration, but at midnight, broken down people would be in the chapel in front of the Blessed Sacrament, singing these very moving, simple chants. And after a week of doing that 3 times a day, plus several hours of the evening, you did find, just as you've been describing with you and Clara, that they get into your bones, and the singing just kind of continues of its own inside the heart. In fact, the trouble is closing your mouth to stop it coming out. But it's this lovely sense that you've got into the river of praise, and you're being carried along by it.
And it's a sense of peace, because actually those thoughts that are, and sometimes the enemy is posting little thoughts, is kind of getting in, and it's like keeping that at bay with praise and not letting that disrupt your peace. God says, Jesus says, doesn't he, shalom, this sense of inner peace. And if we keep our eyes fixed on him, if we take them off, like St. Peter, we'll suddenly start drowning in the waves. But if we just keep our eyes fixed on Christ, and that's a way of keeping ourselves, our mind, our hearts focused and fixed. And we have to work to resist the onslaught. That's the will. We talked earlier about active and passive. That's the active will. We have to say, I choose to plug into this life-giving bloodstream, and that requires something of me that I must act. And when I do, and I might not even understand how or why, then I will be nourished, I will be fed, and the fear will subside and the peace will be restored. And I felt like this.
Sorry.
Go on. No, that's it.
I was reading about some monks in the last couple of days, and one of them was talking about how if there wasn't a really an annoying person in the monastery, he needed to leave and go and find an order where there was somebody who really annoyed him, because only otherwise he really couldn't begin to love his neighbor. And so I was just wondering, what did you find anything that really annoyed you on the pilgrimage that was the equivalent of a blister, or that drew on resources of dealing with anger, annoyance, misunderstanding, projection, whatever?
Yeah, they're your saint makers, aren't they? You hear people say, yeah. I've heard people say that I've got to deal with this person all the time. They're my saint maker. No, I didn't really. I like people anyway. I'm quite a people person. I enjoy fellow people and conversation. And
you are disgustingly holy sometimes. It's really annoying.
No, I'm not. No.
Can't you get down with the rest of us a bit more?
No, I'm not. There was a time at the end of Monday I said, was it Monday? No, it was Saturday. I keep saying Monday because I think it's the first day, and in my head Monday's the first day, but it was Saturday, the end of the first day, where I was feeling very sorry for myself indeed. My hips hurt. I'd collapsed. I couldn't do this. And I got up the next day, as I said, and I made my way. And a young lad, actually, I don't think he's even 20, was saying, oh, his legs hurt. And then a few others say, yeah, legs hurt, yeah, the feet hurt. And I suddenly thought, why do I think I'm special and this is difficult? And I said to my daughter, who by then had got terrible blisters, she's 14, I said, are you okay? Are you okay to carry on? I know your feet are sore. And she said, everyone's feet are sore. And there were these two girls, I wanted to mention them earlier, and before I forget, because this really struck me, this image, two beautiful, fresh-faced, beautiful girls in their own clothes, that maybe they'd made them. They just didn't look like carbon cutouts of the culture. They were glowing, and I kept hearing them giggling at various points. And they spent the 3 days, certainly from the end of day one, so at least 2 days, arm in arm. They were sisters, arm in arm. One who had terrible pain in her feet. She had rotten blisters. The doctor with us looked at them and said, I want to do something with these and lance them. And she said, no, just leave them. And he said they would be agony. She was held up by her sister for the rest of the 2 days, and they hobbled arm in arm like sort of conjoined twins, hobbling together. Not once did the other sister let go of her, and she tried to take her weight. And I thought, again, that's such a striking image. When you think we're trying to escape suffering. I talked about euthanasia earlier. Let's escape suffering. If life gets too painful, let's stop. Let's end life. If life mentally painful, emotionally painful, physically painful, and this was such a wonderful witness to say, pain. Of course, life is going to be full of pain. Of course it is, but do we live it and go through that journey and experience that pain and offer it up? And say, do with pain what you will, Lord, and bring good out of it, and with a joyous heart. And that's what these young girls were doing. And this young girl knelt in front of me at the final mass, and she had her shoes off, because everyone at that point had decided, shoes off now, we've got to start. And the back of her ankles were lacerated raw. The boots had been rubbing. They were dripping blood and lacerations all across the back of her ankles. She was, again, 14 or 15, this young girl. And I thought, where do you get that? You don't get that. You don't see that in a world. You see, oh no, I don't want this. Oh, I'm squeamish. Oh, I don't want any pain. I don't want any discomfort. And then you're fed that often enough. Of course, you're going to say, well, when I'm told I've got 6 months to live, or when I'm so depressed that I don't feel happy again, just slip the old injection in and be done with it all. We need this witness to remember who we are as humans.
Jesus said, "He who endures to the end shall be saved." I don't think Protestants use that verse very much, but it sounds very appropriate for a 100-kilometer pilgrimage. Well, huge respect. I didn't think you'd done enough training. I know you walk with James to mass in the mornings, but I just didn't think it was enough, and I'm really hugely impressed you made it through. Well done.
Yeah, you're still alive.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
it was fine. It was actually fine. It was brilliant. I don't want to put Mark off. I know Mark said I haven't helped. I mean, describing the camp as a refugee camp and everything else was.
Oh, trust me, it's not you, it's me.
Bit of a joke. It was to indicate how unluxurious it was. You know, it was very, very basic, and it was like
no
that. But
coffee,
it
no
was
black coffee
brilliant.
for 3 days.
No.
That would, oh,
I think there might have been coffee, but I don't drink coffee. There was hot water. The French never do tea anyway,
Only
pilgrimage
drinks
or not.
gin, Gavin. You know that by now.
I can't drink alcohol. You know what happens when I drink alcohol? I start speaking French and singing opera. It's not to be done.
That's true. That's true.
Do we? We don't know anything about that.
No, we don't know anything about that.
No, well, no, please forget it. Sorry I mentioned it. Catherine, thank you. It was really very inspiring. Thank you very much.
I think well, I mean, I've been trying to think of answers to your questions, but then they're just outside of that, just some reflections that I wanted to share, because there's this scene in Till We Have Faces, which is by C.S. Lewis. The younger sister, the beautiful younger sister who goes off and she's sacrificed and believed dead, disappears, is then followed by her older sister, Orowol. And Orowol goes, and Orowol's, represents the kind of cynic, modern woman, modern man, doesn't believe in all this nonsense. And she, to her surprise, she finds Psyche still alive, though she's been sacrificed to the beasts of the forest and the mountain. And she's still alive, and they sit together, and Orowol's very practical, very, very of the world, very in the world. And she says something, Psyche, come home, you must come, you shouldn't stay here. And Psyche's talking all the time about this beautiful bridegroom that she's met and how wonderful he is, and this beautiful palace. And Orowol, it dawns on Orowol that she's talking about something that she really believes is there. Yet Orowol is looking around saying, what palace? And Psyche says, can't you see? Look at this beautiful table. Look at these thrones that we're on. And all Orowol can see is a log and some leaves in a forest. And she's thinking, you must be mad, Psyche. There's no such thing here. And in the morning, Orowol glimpses through tired eyes a beautiful palace momentarily. And then it disappears, and she questions her own judgment and thinks, and she spends all her time trying to pull Psyche back into the world, back into reality as she sees it. And I thought of that as I was walking along, and when I reflect back on the pilgrimage, that there is the world that we're in. You can't escape the fact that we're in the world, but there is, as Catholics, as Christians, we see we're married, we have the bridegroom, we've met the bridegroom, we are his bride in the church, we are in the palace, we have all that around us that the rest of the culture are looking at and going, I can't see it. What are you talking about? Where's the lovely thrones and the beautiful table? And where's this husband you're talking about, the bridegroom? I can't see it. And there's this massive frustration, which is expressed beautifully in Till We Have Faces. And I'd recommend you read it to see Orowol's journey then through to the end and how she sees things differently. But it felt like that moment. It felt like, here's a world, and all around me is headphone man and music and noise and distraction. And then in the same world, not out of it, so in it, but is this whole other layer that is there to come and see, come and sit. And we say, no, where is it? I can't see it. Prove it. I don't. And that gives you some kind of heartache. It gives you a kind of heartache, because you think, just as Psyche did with her sister, you feel this terrible pain, and you say, but I want you to be in this palace with me. I want you to know this bridegroom. I want you to know how loved you are. And they're walking around going, nah, there's no palace, there's no throne, there's no bridegroom. And yet here on this pilgrimage, there is, everyone can see the palace. Everyone has those eyes. And it's wonderful.
Do you know St. Augustine, when he was Pope Gregory the Great, who launched St. Augustine on his mission, is famous for saying, who are those slave boys in the marketplace? And the answer is, they're Angli. And he said, non-Angli, sed angeli. They're not the angels, they're angels. And people often think it's because they had fair hair and blue eyes, whatever. But I think, going back to what we were talking about earlier on, our society, particularly the pornographic end of it, trains people to see animalistically and sexually. So you see a woman, and if you've been watching pornography, then what you do is you see her as part of a pornographic scene, and all you see is her animalistic sexuality. And I was very taken by what you were saying about the young people, because what we have is the opposite, just what you've been describing with Psyche. Instead of that, you see angels and you see sanctity. And so I thought, looking at some of those videos, I was reminded of how within the church one develops the opposite of the animalistic side. You develop the angelic side. You see the angel and the saint in people. It helps when they subdue their sexuality, which I think is one of the purposes of being modest. But I was just very struck by looking at the pictures, by whatever sexuality is, it was on a really kind of bottom level, volume turned right down. But the holiness, the sanctity, the angelic, the open, fresh, clean eyes with angels lurking behind the eyeballs, that was turned right up. And I think that's part of the Catholic vision of other people. You look at the other person and you see the angel, the saint inside them, as opposed to the other stuff which is being pushed by the people around us. So we have not just two different cultures, but I love the way you describe the Till We Have Faces, because I think that's exactly right. Two different worlds, two different universes, and you get born again and you move from one to the other.
And yet sitting next to each other, communicating in the same place, yet at
the same time, yes,
at the same time, yet
yes.
distant by this.
Yeah.
And I was also really aware of my faith being a gift. So appreciative. Appreciation is another thing. And again, my daughter said, wow, you really appreciate the littlest things that you don't appreciate in everyday life. You don't appreciate a bed. You don't go to bed every night going, oh, I really appreciate my bed. Actually, I do very often say to my bed, thank you, bed, I like you very much. But so you appreciate things, and you don't take them for granted. And we need to build that into our lives. We really definitely need to build into our lives gratitude, and recognize that all is gift. And even my faith is a gift. And I look at members of my family who don't have the faith, and again, like Psyche, looking at Orwell with sadness, it's not really anger, it's just sadness. I think, and I pray and I say, please, Lord, I pray that they might come to know you, that the people I love might come to know you. But yes, you just talked about pornography there. It's this idea of nakedness. You've got the nakedness in the garden at the beginning before the fall, and there's no shame around that nakedness. It's that nakedness in the glory of, and then you have the sort of nakedness of Noah and the shame about that. And I think we're in the world, we can either present ourselves with and say, Lord, wash me of shame in your glory before you, or we can associate our nakedness with the dirty, beastly, lower base elements, and then it becomes shameful. And we in ourselves are not, we're beautiful, it's very good. God created us in his image and likeness, but are we going to reach up, or are we going to reach down? Are we going to look at Christ, or are we going to turn away and look at that which is antichrist? And the other thing is, we have a lot of complaining in our culture. We do it, okay, but we do have a lot of complaining in our culture. There's too much immigration. We've got so many problems. We're losing our British identity. We're losing our Christian identity. Christendom is dead. Boo-hoo, we don't like globalization. And the COVID pandemic was complain. There are antichrist forces at work. Well, of course, there's always antichrist forces at work. and then some people say we have to combat those antichrist forces by doing this, this, and this, and suddenly they're saying we have to do these antichrist things to combat the antichrist elements in our world. You just think, what are you doing? You're just trying to do things. Let's beat them at their own game. If they're going to be horrible, we'll be 10 times more horrible. If they're going to attack us, we'll attack them back. And you think, that's not how Christ defeats the Antichrist. The way Christ defeats those that are against him is by the cross, isn't it? That's how he defeats that which is evil. And so when we see all the problems in our world, the terrible degradation of our society and our culture, how do we defeat that? We don't defeat that, and we can't defeat that by just trying to beat them at their own game. We defeat that by praying, going to mass, having kids, looking after our families, doing our best to raise them well, and so that they can get to heaven because they're just a gift, and then die in God's grace. And there's no drama. There's nothing. If we all just did that, then that's a wonderful thing that we can do. And so going on the pilgrimage is a reminder of that as we walk together, is that we're on that journey. We're on a journey towards heaven, and we'll get on with it. And we do it suffering? Yes. Do we do it angry and fighting? No, we do it suffering, hobbling, hurting, helping each other, and then getting there.
Well, Katherine Bennett, thank you for joining us on the show today. You've been a great interview.
You're very welcome, Gavin. Ashenden.
Really enjoyed talking to you, and I think this will be a memorable conversation. People will live with people forever. So, well done.
You're welcome. Okay, thanks everyone. Any questions about anything else, you can always type in the comments. But get going on a pilgrimage sometime if you can. It's really a good thing to do. It's wonderful. But that's it from me. Thanks for watching. Tune in again soon when we'll be back to talk about some other Catholic thing. I'm Katherine Bennett. Do visit our website and do join our channel. And I'll try not to interrupt Mark. Sorry.
Who are you, Mark?
Mark Lambert. I'm Mark. Hello. I'm Mark Lambert. Welcome to Catholic Unscripted. No.
Unscripted, you say? Surely not.
I'm Gavin Ashenden. Like, share, subscribe, join our membership. We'd love you to. Thank you very much. Thank you, my dear colleagues. That was just great.
Thank you.